Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. It's our cash tag segment, so let's bring in our next guest, and that's Andy Swan, co-founder at LikeFolio. Andy, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we're talking Airbnb. I'm sure you've seen the fall in Expedia post earnings, and it didn't seem like it was that bad of a report. But it seems like even companies that are meeting or beating expectations kind of getting hit because of the rally that we've seen. Airbnb is up 65% so far this year. What kind of data do you guys have on this company? Because it seems like the travel bug, it still seems hot. But Airbnb, I've seen some calls lately that are saying that, hey, maybe it's not going to be as robust as maybe some of the hotels.
Yeah, I think the safe bet here is that the novelty of Airbnb has certainly worn off from a consumer perspective. And you're right, we're seeing this earnings season as kind of a sell first, ask questions later mentality. That happens a lot of times after a big market rally like we've had, so that's no surprise. But when we do zoom in on Airbnb, there's really two things that strike me. I don't think that the business is doing poorly at all, especially when you look at it in isolation. But what concerns me is when you look at it versus competitors. And so we just took a quick look at the website traffic that is going to Airbnb versus a competitor, Booking.com. And what strikes me again, it's not a big drop off for Airbnb, really pretty strong kind of typical seasonal results. But the difference between the two, the difference in the web traffic on Airbnb versus Booking, you can see back, a year ago was a very significant gap, and that gap has narrowed almost to the point of irrelevance at this point. So it tells me that people are looking elsewhere than Airbnb, and of course, the reason for this, I think, is very clear. People simply are tired of the fees and the runaround that they get when they book through Airbnb. It is not nearly the type of consistent experience that you get at hotels. And when you look at Airbnb versus a whole host of competitors, whether it's hotel chains or general travel sites, in terms of consumer happiness, Airbnb is way down the pack and getting clobbered by Hilton, by Marriott, by Booking.com, even by Expedia, and so I think when we look at this and we see every single hotel chain is above 70% happiness and Airbnb is barely above 60% happiness, it tells us that there's a big disconnect between what consumers expect from Airbnb and what's being delivered. A lot of that is frustration with fees. A lot of that is frustration with communication with some of the hosts. And so I think Airbnb has some trouble ahead of it. I think that they've started to figure some of these things out. But overall, we don't like companies that are the worst in their category in terms of making their customers happy. It doesn't bode well for the repeat business possibilities.
It doesn't help that, names like Expedia and Booking are sort of stepping into this space more aggressively as well. As consumers, I don't think we care too much as long as you have a good selection of products and services available. And the concept was kind of proven by Airbnb. It's not that hard to replicate. If hosts start getting frustrated with some of their keep rates for their bookings, it's not going to take them that much to switch to things like VRBO or wherever if they have a better experience there. But my question to you is, how much of this is sort of a mix in sort of where the travel has taken place this year? We've heard so much about the return of travel to Europe. And I know you can rent Airbnbs in Europe, but you add in the complexity of maybe language barrier, familiarity with the location you're going to. Maybe it's a bigger travel party. Maybe a hotel is just easier. Is there a little bit of that going as well? I know you're focused on English-speaking tweets and social media content, but Americans are the ones doing the traveling, so I imagine they're talking about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that just across the board, unless you're looking for something that a hotel can't offer, such as, a house on the beach or a house in the, quaint little downtown of a small town, a hotel generally is giving people a better, more consistent experience And like you're saying, especially if you're traveling internationally and you're potentially running up against a language barrier, then a hotel really de-risks the travel compared to booking with an Airbnb. And so I think Airbnb is making some steps in the right direction, a little bit more transparency in their pricing. But I think at this point, all that's done is really highlight how much they were kind of ripping people off, in the past. And so they've got some other hurdles to get over. Going into this report, the reaction from Expedia just tells us that the risk for Airbnb shareholders is pretty severe going into this report. Certainly, I would expect that the risk is significantly larger than the potential reward on this report.
Yeah, on to the downside. And I've had that experience, Andy, that you just described, that your data reflects. Rented an Airbnb in the south coast of England. There was a booklet of rules, regulations, things I had to do, versus we stayed in a hotel in London. I was at the checkout counter for 2 minutes. So the ease of things is a lot better than in that experience. But do you have an earnings score going into this one? Because it seems like a lot of the travel stocks have been pulling back lately.
Yeah, officially our data leads to a pretty neutral score, but based on what I saw out of Expedia this morning, I think there's a bet worth making to the downside. I think that if we get a large move, it's more likely to be in that direction than to the upside. And so I'll let you guys figure out a trade from there. You guys are so good at figuring out that defined risk versus reward. But I think if I had to lean, it would be to the bearish side. Officially neutral, but I could really talk myself into a trade on this.
All right, great stuff, great data as always, Andy. Love this angle here, and I was really surprised at the happiness levels of Airbnb, because it seems like everybody's trying to get one. But great stuff as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, that's Andy Swan, co-founder at LikeFolio, breaking down the data. Alex, he's breaking down the data. We're seeing hotel stocks just getting hammered today. Hyatt. They came out with earnings this morning. Marriott's down a little bit. Bookings down on the back of Expedia getting hammered. How do you want to look at this from an example trade?
Really